Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really fundamental for any organization wanting to stay upright when things go wrong. Business continuity planning.
Exactly.
It's really about moving past just, hoping for the best.
Right. It's about actually having steps in place, building that resilience, that organizational muscle memory almost, for dealing with disruptions.
Big or small disruptions, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not just talking bare survival here. The goal is keeping those core functions actually running.
Okay, and today we're going to get into the real nuts and bolts of how that happens, looking specifically at DRI International's Professional Practices for Business Continuity Management.
That's right. We're focusing on Professional Practice 6, Plan Development and Implementation.
Think of this maybe as our session on translating those big ideas, those strategies, into plans you can actually use, step-by-step guides.
Exactly. Practical stuff for when it really counts.
So our goal is pretty clear. Understand how you get from the strategy level down to detailed recovery plans, and importantly, how you make sure those plans are solid, that they'll actually work under pressure.
Makes sense.
Let's start with the objectives for this professional practice then. The first one is about getting things written down right.
That's it. Objective 1. Document plans to be used during an incident that will enable the entity to continue to function. And that phrase, continue to function, that's key.
Right. Resilience in action, making sure the important stuff keeps going.
It's about ensuring those essential services, those core operations, can push through whatever disruption hits.
So it's more than just some quick note somewhere. It needs to be formal, usable documentation.
Precisely. And then the second objective follows right on from that. It's defining the exercise and testing criteria. To validate that these plans you've just documented will actually do what you need them to do, keep you functioning.
So write the plan, then figure out how you're going to, kick the tires, see if it holds up.
Exactly that. Because, let's face it, an untested plan is basically just good intentions written down.
Right. Not much use in a real crisis.
No. So defining those testing criteria right from the start means validation is baked into the process, not just tacked on at the end. It's how you spot the weak points before disaster strikes.
Okay, that makes total sense. So those are the goals. Now, what about the professional, the person actually doing this? What's their role here in plan development?
Well, the first big role is to use the strategies that were already approved back in professional practice 4.
Business continuity strategies, yeah.
Right. Those strategies are the foundation, the bedrock for all the plan documentation that comes next. It's sequential, you see. The what's the strategy informs the how the plan.
Okay, so you figured out your approach. Now you're turning those decisions into actual steps.
Exactly. The second role is defining the structure for the plan documentation itself.
How it's organized, what goes where.
Yeah, like designing a good manual. It needs to be clear, easy to navigate, so people can find what they need fast.
Because you definitely don't want folks scrambling through messy documents in the middle of an incident. Clarity is everything.
Absolutely. Then role number 3. Coordinating the whole effort to document recovery plans.
Not just for, say, sales, but for everything.
Everything. Core operations and all the supporting infrastructure, IT, facilities, communications, you name it. It's a team effort.
Pulling in experts from different departments.
For sure. And recognizing that you might need different types of plans depending on the situation or the part of the business.
Right. No one-size-fits-all approach. Tailored plans.
Exactly. And the fourth role, publishing the plans.
Sounds simple, but I guess it's crucial.
It is. Making sure the right people can get their hands on the right plan right when they need it. A plan stuck in a binder on a shelf somewhere isn't much help, is it?
No, accessibility is key. Okay, objectives, roles. Now let's dive into the activities. What actually happens? Starting with activity 1. Using those approved strategies.
Right. This first activity, it's got a few parts. It involves designing, developing, and then actually implementing the recovery strategies for your operations.
These are the strategies from PP4 we just mentioned.
The very same. The ones that were thought through and signed off on earlier. This is where that strategic thinking starts to become, tangible. Real actions on the ground.
Moving from the what if to the what to do.
Precisely. This activity also covers identifying all the specific requirements for the business continuity plan itself. What absolutely has to be in there, what critical bits need documenting.
And it's not just doing the work, it's also reporting on it.
Yes. Keeping people informed is vital. Progress on plan development and implementation needs reporting up to the designated authorities. Remember, Professional Practice 1 talks about setting up that reporting structure.
Keeping leadership in the loop. Got it. So, strategies guide it, requirements shape it, progress is tracked. What are the actual tasks for implementation?
Okay, several key things here. One is acquiring the necessary resources. That could be internal people with specific skills or external help, like recovery service vendors.
Knowing who and what you need and making sure they're lined up.
Right. Then you establish the actual processes,
Yeah.
the step-by-step for responding, recovering critical functions, and eventually getting back to normal.
This is the real meat of the plan, isn't it? Who does what, when, how.
Exactly. And finally, part of this activity is setting up processes for developing and, importantly, maintaining the documentation
Ah, because things change.
constantly. Business continuity isn't static. Plans have to evolve with the organization.
Okay, makes sense. Let's move to the second activity then, defining the structure for the plan documentation. How do you even start organizing all this?
First step is figuring out the overall architecture. How will it be broken down? What sections? And who's going to write what? Identifying the teams or individuals responsible for each part.
Getting the right subject matter experts involved for their areas.
That's usually the best way. Ensures accuracy and gets buy-in too. And you got to make sure this structure lines up with the overall scope of your planning. Keep it focused.
Don't try to boil the ocean.
Ah, exactly. Now, what should a comprehensive plan cover? DRI says resources, people, facilities, and technology. A whole of organization view.
And potential components, what might be inside?
Well, you could have sections on regulatory needs, strategic stuff like who has authority in a crisis, operational procedures, incident response steps, recovery, restoration, and how you get back to business as usual.
That's quite a list. It touches everything. The source also mentions strategic considerations when you're building the structure.
Yes, several important factors, like how much warning might you get.
A hurricane versus a sudden server crash, for instance.
Exactly. That changes your immediate response drastically. Also, is it likely to be a short disruption or long-term? Your needs and strategies will differ hugely.
Right, and location matters too.
Definitely. Local, regional, multi-site. And then there's the idea of cascading impacts.
Cascading, what's that?
It's when one problem triggers another, then another, like a chain reaction. A power outage hits you, okay, but then maybe it also hits your key supplier, stopping deliveries. Ripple effects.
Ah, the knock-on effects. You need to anticipate those.
You do. Now, defining the structure also means sorting out roles and responsibilities for the development process itself.
Who's doing the writing, the reviewing?
Yes, identifying all the tasks, including, crucially, the tasks for exercising and testing the plan. Remember, validation is built in, not added later.
Right. Testing informs the plan from the start.
And you need a timeline, a realistic one, with milestones for development and for testing. Keeps things on track.
Okay. And tools. Are there specific tools for this?
Yes, there are. Planning software, exercise tools, databases, templates. Part of this activity is setting up a process to review and recommend the right tools for your organization.
Choosing what fits best.
Right. And developing the template you'll use for documenting processes, tech recovery, other bits, identifying supporting documents, and finally, embedding mechanisms for maintenance, like clear version control.
So everyone knows they have the latest version. Phew. Okay, that's just defining the structure. Now, what about the actual content inside the plan? What needs to be included?
It gets pretty detailed. Starts with governance stuff, policies, procedures for distribution, confidentiality rules, who has authority to make which decisions during an event.
Clear lines of authority, vital.
Absolutely.
Right.
Then, the plan needs a clear scope and objectives. What's it cover? What's it aiming to achieve? And these must align with the organization's mission, goals, and overall BC policies.
Connecting it back to the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It should also flag time-sensitive operations, the really critical stuff, and the resources needed to keep them going.
This ties back to the business impact analysis, identifying the priorities.
Precisely. The plan also has to detail the structure of the response and recovery teams. Who's on them? What are their specific roles and responsibilities?
Everyone needs to know their job.
Right. And finally, it lays out the entire activation sequence, from the first assessment of an incident, how it gets escalated, reporting, the formal declaration, kicking off recovery actions, how you eventually rescind the declaration, and the steps back to normal operations.
The whole life cycle of the response. Wow. Okay. That covers structuring and content. Activity 3 is coordinating the documentation of recovery plans for operations and infrastructure. This sounds like where the different plan types come in.
It is. This is where we get into the specifics. It starts with incident management plans. These are about the immediate actions when something happens.
What goes in there?
Key things like life safety procedures, evacuation, shelter in place, the command structure, who's in charge immediately,
Right.
roles and responsibilities for that initial team, where the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is located.
The command post.
Right. And the process for doing that initial assessment, limiting damage, figuring out repair versus replacement costs and time, restoration methods, approvals for work and insurance, even salvage processes.
Okay. Immediate safety control assessment. What about the bigger picture response?
That's where crisis management plans fit. And as the source notes, these link closely to professional practices 5 on response and 9 on crisis communications.
So communication is key here.
Hugely. These plans identify the crisis management team members, outline procedures for incident response, comms, and recovery, and crucially detail notification procedures. Who needs to be told what and when?
And who are we talking about notifying?
Oh, it can be a long list. Depends on the incident. But typically, media, employees, their families, regulators, first responders, maybe easy mat teams, investors, the board, unions, neighbors, customers, vendors, suppliers.
Keeping everyone in the loop. Essential for trust.
Absolutely. Next up, recovery site activation plans.
For when you need to move somewhere else.
Exactly. If your main place is out of action. These detail how to alert the team, the process for declaring the site active, and everything about the recovery infrastructure needed there.
And that infrastructure involves what?
Oh, everything. Admin, logistics, getting new equipment, tech services, getting end users set up, resuming business operations, communication between sites, production recovery, travel and housing for staff, transport for resources, site security, procurement. It's a massive logistical puzzle.
Sounds incredibly complex to pull off smoothly. What about just getting the core work done again?
That's the job of operational recovery plans. They identify the teams, primary and alternate, and list all the resources they need: tech, vital records, communications, contacts, equipment.
The plan for keeping the essential functions going.
Right. And then you have the overarching business continuity plans.
How are they different from operational recovery?
They often take a slightly more strategic view, focusing on how to maintain essential functions using alternative methods when normal resources aren't there. They also name the teams, detail the processes, procedures, communication. Mobilizing and managing those alternate resources is key.
More about the strategic how of keeping the business alive, maybe with workarounds. And we can't forget tech.
Definitely not. Technology recovery plans are critical. Again, identify teams, focus on mobilizing and managing alternate resources for all IT aspects.
Like what specifically?
Storage NAS, data devices, voice data hardware LAN switches, PoE, etc., hardware software servers, tapes, applications, OS, security software, infrastructure power, HVAC, cabling, physical security, and info security, firewalls, authentication, malware protection, encryption.
Wow, covers the whole stack. And the procedures need to be super detailed.
They have to be step-by-step recovery procedures, identifying application dependencies, having change management processes for recovery, problem management, and of course, plans for exercising, testing, and maintaining all this tech recovery capability.
And one last type of plan.
Yes. Importantly, plans to rescind the recovery site activation and stand down other emergency actions. Knowing how and when to transition back to normal is just as crucial as activating.
Right, you don't want to stay in crisis mode forever. Okay, so plans documented. What's the final activity in PP6?
Activity 4. Activity 4 is publishing the plan documents, making them official and getting them out there.
How does that work?
It starts by giving a final draft, including exercise and testing recommendations to the business process owners.
The people who own the functions being recovered.
Exactly. Get their review, their input. It's essential for buy-in.
Makes sense. Then what?
Once reviewed and revised, you get formal approval from leadership, shows commitment. Then you set up clear procedures for distributing and controlling the documents.
Who gets what? How do you track versions?
Precisely. And a big consideration here, how do people access this info if the main IT systems are down?
Good point. Need backups or alternative access?
For sure. Secure hard copies, maybe secure offsite access. Finally, you publish and distribute the plans or the relevant bits to everyone who needs them. Anyone with a role needs the info to do their job.
Okay, so we've gone right through professional practice 6. For objectives and roles, through using strategies, structuring the docs, coordinating all those different recovery plans, and finally publishing them. It's quite the process.
It really is. And it's vital to stress, this isn't a one-off. These plans need constant attention, exercising, testing, assessment, maintenance. That's what we'll get into when we look at professional practice 8.
Right, the living document idea. So, to wrap up this deep dive, Plan development and implementation is really about that translation piece. Strategy into tangible, organized, accessible plans covering all sorts of disruptions.
And a critical part, as we said, is building in how you'll test and validate them from the very beginning, making sure they're practical, functional tools for resilience.
Not just shelfware.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And when you think about all that detail, you can really see how it builds an organization's overall resilience, right? Having that roadmap ready helps navigate the unexpected, minimize impact, and keep the mission going.
Absolutely. A final thought for you listening. Consider how this detailed planning really forms the backbone of navigating those unexpected storms. If you want to explore related areas, definitely check out our previous deep dive on Professional Practice 4, Business Continuity Strategies.
And keep an ear out for our future discussion on Professional Practice 8, exercise testing, assessment, and maintenance. That's the next logical step in making sure these plans work.
Great points. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until our next exploration.